Are we going miniature golfing?
Dinosaur golf.
I want to go. Can I go too? Thank you. Daddy's going to do a quick video, then I'm going to come along, okay? And then can we get ice cream?
Daddy, we can't get ice cream if we eat chips. We can't eat ice cream.
Okay.
We have to put it back.
Okay, come on in. What's up, everybody? I'm going to walk down here to a little quiet spot on our front porch. We got a house full of kids, house full of family members. Everybody's kind of taking a break from the sun right now. But we had a series of interviews this morning, and I want to just share some thoughts with you. If you don't realize already, hiring the right person is extremely important in any business. Whether you're a manager or a leader, or if you're someone that has been hired for a job or considered for a job, and if you got the job and found out, a couple months later or a few years later that it wasn't a good fit for you, maybe you got burned out, maybe you couldn't keep up with the job, maybe you could keep up, but you just found yourself not being happy. And I think a lot of times there's two sides of the spectrum. There's either people that kind of accept being miserable as, it's work. Like, we're never going to love it. I got to do it. I got to, provide for my family. And that's respectable. When people are able to push aside their personal feelings or how they feel about a scenario and do it because people are counting on them, I don't want to undermine that or make those people out to be anything less than just, hard workers that are, just that. They're hard workers and they're committed. And then there's other folks that constantly are chasing the perfect job. And sometimes you can get yourself into a tough spot, and you end up bouncing around from one job to the next because you're always looking for that perfect fit. Or every time you take a job, whether it's a year or 2 years later or a couple months later, you find that you're not happy, and you're always looking for the perfect fit. I think you can get some value out of this video. And in my experience, which is pretty extensive, I've interviewed, maybe 100 people or more. I've hired several people. I mean, we have a staff at our current company of around 35 people, and I'd like to think that all of those 35 people I would hire again tomorrow. Our people do an exceptional job. We all work well together, and everybody supports their co-workers, which is tough. It's easy to say, it's hard to see that through. But sometimes you can make mistakes, and oftentimes it's in the interviewing process and the hiring process. People will most likely be who they've always been. So when you're interviewing people, it's important to understand who you're interviewing, right? So that's the first part of this. One of the tools that we use to get a good look at who we're interviewing, not their experience, not their technical knowledge of the job, but who they are as a person. And we use what I call behavioral profile tests. The one that we've used in the past was DISC. Some of you may have heard of that. We now use one that's considerably more accurate and more comprehensive. Is called the Predictive Index. And it gives each person a behavioral profile based on 4 categories. It goes A, B, C, and D. A is really like your ego or your confidence. And it moves to the left or right, whether you're more independent or if you like to collaborate to make decisions. B is your social interaction. Do you like to be with a group of people? Do you feed off of the energy of other people? Do you enjoy working within a team? Or if you go the opposite direction, you're more independent. You kind of like to work at your own pace in a nice quiet office, probably by yourself. and you might not require a whole lot of supervision or activity. You're comfortable working in a nice quiet space by yourself. Then C is the pace that you like to work at. If you like to work at a pace that is quick, if you like, to have things move quickly, if you're relatively impatient, you'll be left of the line. If you're right of the line, you like to be steady. Like you like things to every 15 minutes have a milestone, regularity, where someone that's to the left of the line with the pace of their work feels much more comfortable working in a rapid pace where they might need to, multitask. And then D, is structure, or what we call process. When you're left of the line, you're pretty flexible and loose with rules, things like schedules, things of that sort. And then if you're on the right hand of the side, you're pretty rigid when it comes to process and rules. Like you are a person that likes to have a schedule laid out for the day, and you get up and you execute that by the rules each and every day. And without it, you may feel lost. You may get frustrated, where other people that are left of the line, that are flexible with the rules and the schedule, have the ability to kind of find their way through the day, find their way through a project, find their way through a set of tasks without having specific instructions. So none of these are right or wrong, but depending on the position that you're hiring for, there is and should be an ideal fit. So when you're hiring, you should have a understanding of what these different behavioral profiles are, and you should also have an ideal profile for each of those positions. For example, the behavioral profile of an ideal salesperson looks much different than the behavioral profile of an ideal accountant. For an example, a salesperson would typically have a high A, a high B, which means they're very confident. They are comfortable working independently. They do enjoy and like being with people. They feed off the energy of the people. They're going to have a very low C, which means they like to work at a quick pace. And they're most likely not going to be much when it comes to process, because if you think about it, to move quickly, to connect with people, and to have a certain level of confidence, you're not going to be able to slow down enough to map out process and have A through Z of everything that you do spelled out. You need to have some flexibility, because when you're working with people, Wes, we do use DISC. We just found that it's not as accurate as what we would like. I would encourage you to look into something called Predictive Index, or PI. I can send you a copy of it. But Predictive Index has about a 70% accuracy, maybe even higher, where DISC is around 40%. And then the Predictive Index just has like 30 plus tools that you can use. It shows you how to have people work together that have different profiles, like things to encourage them. This is how you should communicate with people in sales if you work in service. So it's a better tool, quite frankly. DISC was, I think, free for a long period of time. So you get what you pay for sometimes. But we use DISC for a very long time, multiple years. But anyway, as you go through and map out the different positions within your company, based on what's required of that person in that position, you can easily build out an ideal behavioral profile. So you can say, for an accountant, they should have a very low A, a very low B, super high C, super high D, which means they can work by themselves. They are not naturally someone that feels that they need to strike up communication and conversation with people throughout the office, which they shouldn't be. Because if you're doing things like accounting, having a conversation with 3 or 4 people throughout the day as they walk past your office can be a distraction. And then they're going to be extremely patient, and their D, which would be their processes, everything has a black and white process that they adhere to, and there is no flexibility with that, which is the way you need to be when you manage money. So you can see the difference between what I described between a salesperson's profile and an accountant's profile. So let me tell you what happens in the absence of those tools. We typically, as managers or leaders, hire people that we like, and we normally like people that are like us. So if you are a salesperson, you should not, without this tool, be interviewing and hiring accountants, because what you'll tend to hire is someone that you like, who is very similar to you, that will end up being a great person that you'll get along with, but will suck at being an accountant. So that's the reason why you should have a behavioral profile system and test that you use when you screen possible applicants. You should have an ideal profile for each of those positions. And then once you have an ideal profile, you need to have, about a 60 to 75% match to consider interviewing that person as a fit for that job, because it's not an end-all be-all. There are people that, can be a 50% plus match as a behavioral profile, but can easily be coached through the areas where they're not a perfect match. If they are working for someone, if they have a leader or a manager or a team that they work with, a lot of times as a company, when you have access to resources like that, you can encourage their strengths, and then you can coach them around or give them process to help minimize the impact of where they're not ideal. So once you get to the interview phase, it's important that you drill in on those areas. A lot of times I feel when we interview, we give people, softball questions, or we tee them up and we answer questions like, are you a hard worker? I mean, what's the answer to that question going to be? We ask people about their previous experience, about what they liked most. But if we don't specifically engineer those questions around their weaknesses, we won't understand either A, if they're coachable, and B, we want to know how they respond when they're put into a position to where if someone, let's say, is naturally not inclined to work with people, but a problem pops up in their job where they have to work together with the team to get to a solution, I want to walk them down that path and get an example of how they would respond. Because our weaknesses don't really matter until they come into play. If I'm 5'11", right, and I'm playing basketball, my size doesn't become an issue until there's someone taller than me, or there's a task or something that needs to be done that requires someone to play at or above the rim. Does it make sense? Like our weaknesses don't become important, and neither do our strengths until we're able to apply them, or we need to apply them. So this is what you need to do. You need to understand someone's behavioral profile, understand what the ideal fit is for the position that you're hiring for, and then specifically drill in. An interviewing process should be an attempt to disqualify someone for the position. And if we ask them, teed up questions about their experience, because there's plenty of people that have 15 years worth of experience doing a job that they shouldn't be doing. And if you hire based off of experience and references alone, you won't understand how to properly coach or support that person to help them improve, and also help them to feel better about where they work. A lot of times we'll have people that modify their behavior, right? So you can have someone that's naturally not comfortable being around people or engaging with people, and they work in sales. Well, the only way you're going to make sales is to work with people. So they force themselves to modify their behavior. They then become, more outgoing. They engage with people, but it takes so much of their emotional energy that at the end of the day or the end of the transaction, they're exhausted. And eventually when someone modifies their behavior and it takes so much energy for them, they're going to eventually be burned out. They're not going to enjoy the process anymore. What they give up and how they modify their ideal behavior in comparison to what they get, which is money on the other side, will often not be enough. Matter of fact, if you look at different studies about why people change jobs, it has a lot to do with not feeling appreciated and not being respected or congratulated for the job that they do. Typically, it has nothing to do with compensation, for the most part. Some people leave a job for a better opportunity pay-wise, even though they enjoy the environment or they enjoy the culture or they feel like they're respected. They may leave for money. Sometimes money and cash is king. But more times than it happens because of money, it's happened because of something that you can control directly as their manager or leader. So make sure that once you've created a behavioral profile, you should be giving it to every single candidate. Compare it to the ideal profile of a person that would be successful in that position. And then during the interview process, drill into the areas of opportunity where they are not ideal, give them real life scenarios, and ask them how they would respond. And now what you're getting is an idea or an example of what their failure may look like. Because listen, what we try not to talk about in a new interview process is what failure looks like, right? We're trying to find a reason to hire them. But really what you need to talk about is what failure looks like. How are they going to adapt? You might have a very nice person that that, excuse me, based on the behavioral profile does not deal well with confrontation. Their job may call for them to be a little bit confrontational with someone. They may need to hold someone accountable. That may escalate to a point to where they need to make a yes or no decision that may not be well received by that client or that vendor or that person that they're working with. And the way that they respond to that pressure may not be what you're looking for. So if someone is not naturally inclined to deal with confrontation, when confrontation comes, they may snap. Because they're completely uncomfortable, and they feel like they're a person that enjoys and really likes to connect and be friends with people. So they may avoid accountability because they see it as confrontational. And then when the chips are down and the pressure's on and they have to hold someone accountable, they may go 180 degrees and be confrontational and lose all ability to connect and be compassionate and show empathy. And then you see people that are, acting out of character, like, hey, that person was really rude or they were extremely short with me, and that's not like them. That's because the situation put them in a position to where it was asking something of that person that did not feel natural to them. So when you really press on those things and dig into those issues in the interview process, you're getting sort of a look into the future, which is ultimately what we want. When we hire someone, when we interview people, it's a gamble. We're betting on what we believe they will be like. So the better information, if we can run them through 3 or 4 scenarios we know that may be challenging for them based on their behavioral profile, it gives us a better idea of what we can expect when the pressure's on. Because when there's no pressure and everything's going well, it's easy for everybody to be happy. It's easy for everybody to be easy to get along with. The true testament of how well you've built your team and how well you've staffed is when the pressure's on and there's a little bit of stress and there's some anxiety. How well do that group of people work together? Are they able to maintain their cool under pressure? So that's what you want to look at. And I think those tools that we talked about on this video will give you the ability to hire better. It'll keep you from making mistakes and bringing somebody on board that has the experience, that has the technical knowledge, may even fit your core values. They're honest. They operate with a high level of integrity. They're committed to being excellent, and they're super respectful. But if you put them in a position that requires them over and over and over again to modify their behavior, that's when you'll get them and see somebody act out of pocket or out of character. So hopefully this is helpful for you. We're always interviewing and hiring for people. It seems like over the course of the last 2 years, we've grown so fast that we're always, adding and hiring more people. So it's something that I've really made a commitment to, and our company's made a commitment to try to be the best at. Because turnover is definitely not fun. Hiring the wrong person, whether they stay or leave, can be detrimental. It can suck the life out of a team. It can get you distracted. I mean, when you're hiring to replace somebody, it's a big commitment. You'll spend hours and hours and hours interviewing, screening, checking references. We typically have 3 to 4 interviews before we hire someone. We may have 15 to 25 man hours tied up in the interview process. So if you can avoid, those interviewing and hiring processes because of turnover, then you've gotten that 25 hours back where you can spend that time doing something more productive. Then ultimately, once someone has left and you've made the decision to cut ties, or if they've left, that process doesn't happen overnight, right? Like if someone quits, they're probably considering it for several weeks or several months, which means that their productivity and the results that you're getting from them will suffer over that course of that period of time. If you as a leader or a manager are not happy with someone's productivity, or they're dragging down other people in the office, it not only has an impact on that person's results and productivity, but they can actually drag down everybody that they come in contact with. So you could see the company's results as a whole drop. So anyway, I could go on and on about this, but I just wanted to hop on here and give you a couple quick tips that we've learned about behavioral profiles, and then how to use that when you build out an ideal profile for a position, and then really how to use that information to your advantage and the person's advantage that's being interviewed, so that you don't put them in a bad position. For companies, a lot of times we can go out and hire another person and plug in another person. We have the luxury of being able to hire, right? There seems like there's always people looking for jobs. But you also have an obligation to the person that you're interviewing to not put them in a bad position. They're leaving another job and coming to work for you, and it ends up not working out. You've uprooted that person's life. They may have moved to be closer to work. They may have left a job that was actually a better fit for them. It's difficult for a person then to go out and find another job, and it's not a process that most of us enjoy. Being interviewed and hired for a job is stressful. There's a lot of pressure. When we're not awarded the job, it can be extremely depressing. So do yourself a favor, and also I think you have an obligation to the person you're interviewing as well. So anyway, I hope that has been helpful. Hiring and people are the most important thing we can do as leaders and business owners. And I found these things to be extremely helpful, and I believe it's had a really, really great impact on our team and our culture and our results. So hope everybody has a good day. Y'all take care.